I assume we probably can get going, Julian.
Okay. All right. Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all our participants, whether you're joining us from the comfort of your home office, your workplace, or anywhere else. We're delighted to have you here today. We have two incredible people with us who will be sharing their extensive knowledge and experience on cyber resiliency. Just one more time for the new people that are joining. This webinar is being recorded, so if you guys happen to miss any parts, it will be available afterwards. And if you guys do have any questions, there is a Q&A at the bottom where you guys can submit them. With that being said, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you guys.
Okay, well, thanks, Julian. I'm Jeff James. I'm part of the management team over at Storcom. For those who don't know us, we've been in business 20 plus years here, primarily based out of the Chicago metro area, but certainly all around the country, et cetera. We've been in the business since day one of making sure our clients stay up and running, making sure that you guys take care of your clients, and should disasters happen or incidents happen or of any level, we're there to help you get up and keep going and make sure your data is protected and make sure your organization stays effectively and running in business. Tony, slide. So and that involves at the end of the day, it's our job is to bring the best people, product, and resources to the table, establish parameters, because we all know at the end of the day, there's multiple layers when it comes to security. So from the people side of the education of your employees to make sure they're not opening the bad stuff, and then combine those products and services to all-encompassing provide a solution set. Our real value at the end of the day is we really become part of your team. Our best clients, they have all our cell phone numbers. When incidents do happen, and they happen, I'm not gonna tell you they don't. We're there. We're there right away to make sure that we get all the other resources to get you back up and going quickly. So that's our job. And what I think is important, especially in the security business or any part of this business, is that to understand our clients and what their particular needs are, and then of course bring those resources to the table. And in that, we thought we teamed up with IBM. IBM's everybody knows, right? It's a strong player in the industry for forever, and they continue to be strong, bringing innovations to the table and so forth. And what we found very informative is they brought on consultants like Tony Owens here, who is a former bad guy, now good guy, and so very, very interesting. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. What we want this to be is very open. You got a question, please fire it out there. That's Julian's going to handle these questions coming in, and let's keep this as informative and informational as possible. So with that, Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks for allowing me to come in. So, you kind of bring on a very important point. Knowledge is power, and the messaging that we're talking about, Jeff, as you were talking, you mentioned security, and security. People have the impression that security was really about barring the door, right? Keeping the bad guys out, locking the door, not letting the guys in. And there's an evolution that's kind of taken place. We know now that, especially with the different types of attacks that we see, especially, since the NSA got their nice toolkit stolen, and now that nation states are starting to get in the act of doing cyber attacks, that there's not really as much an opportunity to bar the door. It's more, if they get through, how do we respond? Much like we thought of if we're preparing for a hurricane or a flood, how do we prepare our disaster recovery? How do we prepare our recovery options? Now we have to look at it from in the event of a cyber incident, not if it happens, but when it happens, how do we prepare for that? So a little bit of background for you guys, right? So many people often ask me, well, who are the type of different hackers out there, right? As I mentioned already, nation states. These are North Korea, China, Iran, the countries out there that are attacking us, not just because of political reasons, but it's strategic. They're trying to gather data, espionage, or they're trying to sow fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the population as to make less credible our political agendas versus their political agendas. There's the cyber criminal groups that are out there simply for much like, think of the mafia, if you will, or organized crime. They're out trying to collect ransomware. They're trying to fund their coffers and build up their back end so they can do more. We have the traditional political hacktivists, right? They want to influence social opinion or social justice type of activities, and so they'll attack companies based on their stance or whatever. One of the really sad ones is obviously competitors. Your competitors in the industry may want to get a leg up on you, and they may hire or engage in cyber activities to tarnish your reputation, or to damage or to steal information that on projects that you're working on. And then finally, one of the last ones is the disgruntled employee. Now, sometimes it's actually an angry or disgruntled employee, and sometimes it's just a naive employee, right? Somebody that does something accidentally. It's the insider threat that we all face. There are different tactics and reasons that each of these different organizations go after you, and how they go after you, and how they target you. But just know that that is a position that you need to be aware of when it comes to it. So let's look at a few facts and statistics, if you will. So cyber attacks, ransomware attacks have increased 95% since 2021. Ransomware, the time to drop. So we would think of an intruder breaking into a system, and then the amount of time that they would be in the environment before the actual ransomware or the attack would take place was about 280 days. It took that long for them to escalate the privileges and do the necessary steps that they needed to do in order to get to a position where they controlled enough of the environment and maybe had shut off backup resources and other things to where they felt confident that they could launch off that ransomware attack to actually execute. We now see these type of things can happen in hours. So the surface area that we're looking at now, your systems have to be able to detect and respond very quickly to prevent this from occurring in your environment. And we also have the next evolution of this. So now that we have these, since Russia invaded the Ukraine, we've seen an increased number of this in what we call cyber warfare. It's people, Russia or hacker groups associated to Russia attacking, allies or the Ukraine or vice versa. And now we've got, Iran that wants to, they're angry at us for one thing or another. And so they're attacking, and China's trying to position themselves as a global power in the marketplace. So all of these big organizations or big countries are starting to move into, look, this is something we can do. And we're not pulling a trigger, but we're causing the same type of destruction and damage that we could be if we had launched off a missile or fired a bullet. So these type of threats are real, they're growing. Just this year alone, cyber attacks are up 2x already over the year. We have an increase in 17% increase in just the ransomware so far in 2023. The really one that kind of scares me the most, and I think causes the most concern for a lot of people, are what we call dormant threats. 21% of them are of the attacks today are dormant threats, and that's a 5% increase year over year. And what a dormant threat is where I actually break into your environment, I get control of the necessary things, and then I just stop. I don't do anything. I don't launch off an attack. I let it sit there, and it may sit there for 6 months, 18 months, a year. whatever's necessary for me to think that I have aged out your backups, your snapshots, your recovery processes, and then I'll launch off the attack. So that I think I have infected enough of your environment and it's been there for long enough that even when you start trying to do things like recovery and bring back your environment, I still have my software embedded in there. Now, this was an announcement, and I put the link out here for anybody that wants it in the document. But back in October of last year, the Joint Task Force of the NSA, the CISA, and the FBI sent out this joint memorandum, and it said, "Listen, as we look at what we're seeing from the Russian invasion, and we see all these things coming in, and we see these big nation state attacks, we want the American people, we want businesses to know that these top 20 attacks here are still the #1 attack that China is using against American companies. And these are known. These are known entities. They've been around for a while. You'll see Log4j on here. You'll see a Cisco HyperFlex one, vCenter one that's out here. These are known common vulnerabilities that have been identified. There's patches for them. There's all that available. But because of the fact that either we're running applications or we're running systems where we can't necessarily update the code on the system or do the patches for that particular system because it may break something else, these are vulnerabilities that still exist out there in a lot of environments. So we have to find ways to fence off those systems or protect them from being able to be reached or breached or accessed. Now, I want to bring up one that pretty much everybody heard about, but a lot of people really don't know what it was. So SolarWinds, if you guys have heard about SolarWinds, SolarWinds was one of the first true class 2 type of attacks. And when we say class 2 and we talk about nation state, what we mean is these type of attacks have never been seen in the wild before. They're like the NSA playbook type of attacks. They're 0 day, they don't exist on any book, no firewall, no antivirus, no nothing that you have is going to even detect it or notice it. It's going to come through our defenses like pretty much a hot knife through butter. And the reason, SolarWinds went through every level of testing through the federal government. They had it isolated off. They did all the testing for it. It went through 9 months of testing through the most rigorous environments in the world, and then was deployed in production. And then 9 months after it was deployed in production, it was discovered by accident. It wasn't that somebody's firewall or somebody's antivirus program or whatever detected it. It was a person like me or Jeff sitting there that said, why is this thing sending up these connections? And it only does it periodically, and it's connecting to these 2 ports and these 2 IP addresses, but those are in Russian. Why is it sending in this vast amounts of data? So it was discovered by accident. But when they did, obviously the curtain came down. We realized that now that cyber warfare is part of the landscape. And that's where we have these new class 2 type of attacks. There's others that I'm sure many of you've heard about. The Apple intrusions with the Pegasus software, where they can literally take over an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad. It used to be that we had to send a text message to somebody. Now they don't even have to do that anymore. They can just turn it on at the snap and take over the device, turn on the camera, turn on the recording, siphon information off of it. And these are things that are out there in the wild today. And there's really no protection. Apple tried to patch it. As soon as they patch it, the developers of that blew right through Apple's patch like there was no tomorrow and said, yeah, nice try. Didn't help any. So what are some of these that look like? Well, one of the other ones that are kind of more threatening in the class 2 is what we call like a wiper class. And this is one that I broke down. This is one of the ones that was used in the attacks that were going on from Russia to the Ukraine. And again, it's taking advantage. It's not it's not your traditional thing. It's not like you're clicking on a file and downloading it, and there's an executable on your system that says hackme.exe that's going to install a ransomware and execute blah, blah, blah. No, this is actually, you connect to a compromised website, and it comes in the normal flow of your HTTP traffic and Java enabled and HTML5 enabled, and it takes advantage of vulnerabilities that exist within either the development side of the operating system or within the operating system itself to allow things like set up privilege access, create a new driver, load a new driver, change the permissions, escalate a user privilege, open up API services, and then actually execute things. And it ultimately, after it's done all these changes and scanned for everything and found all of its stuff and wiped everything out, it reboots itself. Now, this was one that IBM's team actually went in and found, and they actually produced this indications of compromise. So they actually, in our QRadar software, they actually detected that these things would be occurring if this was an event that was taking place. And if so, they could key on it, they could alert on it, and they could take action on it. So as these things come out into the wild, that's what happens. These new class 2s, there's nothing out there for them day one, but once they get deployed, the first time they start getting used, people start developing things around it. So I'm sure many of you on the phone, I mean, you're probably familiar with this. It's a plan of action, no different than whether for pretty much just about anything else, but you're establishing incident response teams, you're planning planning your testing, you're doing testing like pen testing and other things in the environment, you're developing frameworks for how to go through in the process if there's something happen. You have detection and analysis in place, so you're set up, you're saying, okay, we've got our firewalls, we've got our necessary things setting up, blocking the door, and if something gets through the door, we'll get an alert or notification, and then once we have that, we'll contain it, we'll eradicate it, and if we have to, we'll do the necessary recover to bring back that system that was compromised, and then we'll have a post-incident activity. We'll go back and we'll look at what happened, and we'll figure out, well, what really went wrong, and how do we do that? So much like you have this type of approach, the bad guys do. So what you see on the screen in front of you, this was my cyber playbook. As Jeff mentioned, I used to be on the dark side. This was my playbook that I would run through when I was taking over a system. I would do Kerberos attacks. I would do Mimikatz to create escalated privilege users in the system. I would use different tools and resources at my disposal. And like I said, today we hear a lot about Ansible and automation and things like that. This allowed me, a single person, to look like hundreds of people attacking you. And the reason we do,
Tony, how many, what percentage of, I mean, you target, how did you target a particular client? And if I targeted X amount, what percentage of those clients do you think you could get into?
So everybody I ever targeted, I got into. It was just a matter of time. So some customers were easier to breach, others were more difficult. It was just a matter of how much time and energy I wanted to spend to get in.
Did you make an assessment as the perpetrator here? It's like going up to a house and one house has a sign that says ADT alarm system. I walk to the next house and say, I can probably get in there. It's going to take me a little longer, but I might as well just walk on to the next house.
Actually, when I walk out of the house that says ADT on it, I go ahead and cut the phone lines and break into that house.
Well, I know, but it's a little harder. So maybe the whole idea possibly.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you want to do, so when we look at cyber resiliency, and we're going to get into more of this as we get into the conversation, I'm not saying that your defenses that you do today, any of your security, is useless. It will prevent what I call script kiddies. It will prevent most people. And the best thing you can do is to make it difficult for me. The harder it is, the more time I have to invest trying to break into your environment, the more likely I am to get bored and to want to move on to an easier target. If I'm like most cyber criminals, I want to get paid. I want to get something out of it. And just like you want to go in and you want to do your job, and at the end of the day, you want to be paid for that job, and you don't want to do 20 things that you don't have to do that aren't going to lead you to that goal of getting paid for your work. So, I I mentioned some of those different documents and stuff and the planning and all that. And this is from some information that we get from IDC research. We did a big thing with them last year, and it said that about 3/4 of all the organizations today have some type of cyber recovery playbook. And 90% of them said that their playbook was either efficient or highly efficient. And 90% of those said that, oh yeah, we have some level of automation that we've already incorporated into this to do the recovery. And what we tend to find though is that, and my picture may be covered up here with our picture, but basically it's Mike Tyson has a famous quote, and he says, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. And that's what happened. Out of these companies that IDC had questioned and asked, the results was that 46% of them, out of all those that had responded, actually had a successful attack against them in the past 3 years. 47% of them actually ended up paying the ransom. And in 22 of those attacks, everybody thinks, oh, well, we have air-gapped backups, we have air-gapped this, and we have that. They found a way through and compromised the backups for those environments and stuff. And nearly half of them experienced some form of data loss. So even if they paid the ransom, they didn't get all their data back. And the number one reason for paying the ransomware and for lost data was they could not identify the point that they needed to restore from. What time did they need to go back to? Where did they need to go back to in order to recover? The other thing that was really interesting is of the 47% that paid the ransom, 85% of them were reinfected with the exact same infection that originally hit them. That does not mean that they were reattacked. It means that they did not eradicate the infection from the environment and were basically hit again. Now, one of the things that I go through quite a bit with people is that traditionally, we always thought of financial and insurance companies as being the number one target. And the sad news is that every industry of every size has had successful attacks. And the latest research shows that in the past 2 years, manufacturing and supply chain companies have become the number one target. It's no longer the insurance companies and the financial industry, because they know if they disrupt the supply chain and if they disrupt manufacturing, they're more apt to get paid more quickly than the companies that have the resources to fight it.
Yeah, and I just want to back up what you said there. In the real world is where the Storcom gets involved and so forth, and we've been involved in many of these recovery episodes and so forth. And it's all those percentages seem very clear. There's great confidence going in, but there's no substitute for proper planning, really going through the drills, really doing the testing and so forth. Because it's a tough day when we're trying to recover and you got manufacturing lines that are down and people are losing, people are all being sent home, and you got international connections going on, et cetera. So the quarantining, the getting in and really doing the due diligence, getting that work done. I can't stress enough. The sad, well, not sad part, but the reality is you don't hear about most of the attacks, because the last thing a company wants to do is have it out on the market that they're not doing a good job protecting their data, which may in turn be going to their own clients' data. So it's a really messy world out there in this space. So it's very important.
Jeff, it is, and that's why Jeff and I, one of the things that we try and help our customers understand is that this is now a marriage. It's no longer, oh, we have our security team, and the security team is responsible for locking our door. And we have our data protection team that's responsible for our backups and our recovery and those type of things. Those two entities can no longer exist mutually exclusive. They now have to start to actually work together. So, and the reason is technology obviously is evolving and changing. And one of the things that we are starting to do in our storage today is we are starting to track entropy of the data itself. So we look at the way that your write patterns go and your read patterns go for reading and writing data back to the backend storage. And if all of a sudden you go from a 40% read activity that's normal for you to all of a sudden being an 80% read activity, well, that may very well be an espionage type of attack like SolarWinds, where data is being exfiltrated out of your system. If your write workloads are typically 50% and all of a sudden jump up to 90%, well, that may be a ransomware attack that's taking place on the system. So the storage itself is able to communicate back to the security side of the house to say, hey, I see these type of activities taking place and they're outside the norm. They're not what we expect. And we're actually integrating in now to actually do detection of known ransomware and other signatures and stuff like that as well. So if it even gets written to the storage right away, if it hits one of those indications of compromised or a signature of a type of thing, it'll immediately alert the security side as well. And the security side can also take action. So if it sees activity that's going on, it can actually start to do things as well. Wow, my slide's jumping all over the place here. So let me back up one there. Come on, back up. Don't do this to me. I love it how my slides just want to automatically advance past. Okay, it's just not going to let me do this. So a little bit about IBM Splash System and why this is a big part of the equation. Because IBM invested with a company called Texas Memory Systems a few years ago, and they acquired all of their flash technology. So Texas Memory Systems has been in the business for 30 years of developing flash technology. And they used to work with all those three-letter acronym agencies like the NSA and the CIA and all those for deploying systems that were very high performance, very low latency, able to handle the workloads that they were doing. And IBM took that and incorporated it in with some of IBM's storage virtualization software to develop the flash system. That storage virtualization software IBM's had around since for 20 years now. And they've continued to develop it, enhance it. It has capabilities of virtualizing not only their own storage, but storage from other vendors as well. But one of the newest things that was added to it was the ability to do these cyber secure immutable snapshots, these point-in-time copies. And
just a quick question there, Tony. So what you're saying is that I can take, because we go into many clients and obviously you want to do upgrades. They've invested a lot of money into their current storage systems. They have ongoing maintenance contracts and so forth. And they want to get some of the newer capabilities, functionalities, and security and so forth. So I can place the virtualization system in front of that and now leverage all that existing hardware and so forth.
absolutely.
And features, functionality.
And take advantage, exactly, and take advantage of all these additional features. So right. That safeguarded copy capability, the cloud tiering capability, the ability to continue to expand or tier off our data and stuff, to be able to leverage, the really high performance, low latency storage in the flash system, but maybe leverage some of the other storage that we have as a second tier or an archive tier in that piece of the equation. So yes, it's continuing to get the investment out of that equipment until it's finally end of life and off the books, and using it till as I say about like cars, I'm going to drive it till the wheels fall off and stuff. Same thing. I'm going to leverage every bit of hardware I can until it hits the door, hits the dust. So this is one of the slides. I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Now You See Me, and it's one of my favorite lines from a movie, because he says, you know, I want you to come close. I want you to get really close, because what you think you see is what I want you to see. And that's what we see when a hacker starts to attack your environment. What the first alerts that you start getting is designed to draw your attention somewhere else. And then the umpteen thousand alerts that come past that is designed to give you alert fatigue, so that you don't focus on the primary action that's taking place. And with cyber recovery, it's different than disaster recovery. With disaster recovery, you know, kind of, okay, there's a hurricane headed for our area. There's a set of thunderstorms that are coming in, or a potential flood that's coming this way. We need to maybe switch over to our DR. We have a known point in time, or a known type of effect that's going on. It's more of a regional impact area. You know, we know what the time to recover on that is, and actually the probability of it occurring is relatively low. Unfortunately, as we look at cyber, it's a global stage. We don't know where the particular recover point may be, because we don't know at what point the attack started and at what point the attack may end or affect a particular system. It is very targeted. It's based on a situation for recovery, and the data to recover is often unknown at the time. You don't know how broad scale it is. And unfortunately, the probability of it, according to IDC research, is that by 2025, 75% of all businesses will have been hit by some form of cyber attack. That's a relatively scary number when you think about it. So what does it look like in real time? As I said, we do this in our lab quite a bit. And if and Jeff, if any of the customers would like to dive deeper, we can always set up a call with them afterwards to kind of take them through it. But I captured a couple screenshots here for you guys just to see. This was a cyber attack that I launched off. Yes, I run my own cyber attacks in my lab so that we can help, you know, show people what it looks like. And this one, it ran over 7 hours, or almost 7 hours. And out of all the events, out of the 444 alerts that came out of the system, the real meat and potatoes of it happened within 2 minutes. And it was these series of events here where I escalated privilege, I got in and did what I did. So as an admin, you're filtering through 7 hours worth of stuff, 444 events. But my real thing that I did took place in less than 2 minutes. So the problem is, you're going to be sitting there filtering through that. You've got alert fatigue. You're going to be trying to go through that. Well, if you've got the right tools in place, you can set up these use case managers where they actually go through, and based on MITRE ATT&CK framework, you can outline, look for all these type of conditions. Remember that one slide I showed you with the indications of compromise. So there's certain things that you're looking for in these type of attacks. Well, you can set up the system and say, be on the lookout for these things. If a new driver gets created, if my shadow copies gets disabled, if my whatever the case may be, these are all indications of things starting to progress. And in conjunction with all the data coming in from my firewall and other information flowing into the system, I want you to start taking educated decisions about what happens. So the old saying is, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And what we can do with that is, whenever X happens, we can cause condition Y. So as it correlates that information, and as it looked through and it found those 6 things that I really was doing, it didn't really, the other things were just noise. They were denial of service attacks and little stuff like that that weren't really hurting anything. It was more annoyance than anything else. But the 6 things that I did in there to escalate privilege and to escalate my user and to change some parameters in the back end so that I could actually do something, It detected that and it said, okay, based on that, I'm going to kick off this safeguarded copy. And this is the command. This is the little Python script that's out there that basically tells it, when you see this, I want you to go ahead and execute your own version of the safeguarded copy. We're going to have a scheduled one that we run automatically, but this is in addition to those that we have scheduled. If you detect a compromise, if you detect something that looks like the attack, I want you to take one too. Because one of the things that an attacker will also do is they'll try and clean up their tracks. So once the attack starts, they're going to try and clean up whatever they're doing. This catches everything as it is at that moment for forensic analysis and for recovery. So in our environments generally, we already have levels of security, right? Guys, you already have cybersecurity. You already have some data protection in place. You may be doing some data classification with compliance and risk management. What we're saying is now let's step it up a little bit. Let's add in that data isolation. Let's make sure we get air gap copies of our backups, localized, isolated snapshots on the primary storage that we can use for fast recovery. Let's look at doing anomaly detection and integration to where it's not just our security system looking for the bad guy, it's our storage and other parts of our environment also reporting that out and correlating that together so that the left hand is working with the right hand together. They're actually working together now as a whole picture from the moment data comes through the door to the data gets written down to the disk. Tell me if anything looks crazy in that whole picture. All right. Finally, think about it from a recovery perspective. I need to kind of think about my company into two categories. I need to think of it as a minimal viable company. That's the processes and pieces that I need to operate the systems and people to work day in and day out. I can be under attack and still operate my business if my minimal viable company is running. The rest of it may be long-term file shares, other data that's out there in the environment. That's important to us. Don't get me wrong. We still want to make sure it's good, but it's not the first priority in recovery. So those are the type of some of the things that you want to look at and then orchestrate it. Build in the automation that allows me to say, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. When you woke me up, I don't want to have to go find a book and start going through the playbook and figuring out who to call in and set up a team meeting. No. So where IBM is going is we're setting up this thing with Storage Defender. We're building out this page, if you will, this dashboard that allows you to come in and look at this dashboard like when you're sitting there in the morning having your morning cup of coffee, or in my case, my Mountain Dew, and you're looking at the alerts and you're seeing what's going on and working with all different kinds of apps, all different kinds of vendors. This is not just this only works with IBM solutions. No, across the board, a whole laundry list of different vendors and suppliers and solutions, all coming together to say, look, I need to be able to say, if something's going wrong in my Oracle database, if I see a detection of an error or a compromise or a condition, then I want to have an automatic playbook out here that I just click on. So I don't have to tell Dave to go down the hall and go dig out the playbook and flip to page 33 and tell me what it says. I click in here and I start executing through. And we have designed and loaded in those playbooks so that the steps become automatic. It's not a manual step. You're not waking up because, trust me or Jeff, either one, if you wake us up at 3 o'clock in the morning, our first thing is going to be like, where's the coffee? Where's a drink? Let me go splash some water in my face. And we're going to take a few minutes to figure out what our action is. If you've already built it in the system, you know what the first actions are. You know what the second actions are. You know what the whole process is all the way down through. Now, I want to show you what this looks like a little bit from a hardware perspective and the back end side of things. And I'm just going to paint it out really quickly for you. So we have our primary workloads. We're taking real-time snapshots on there, right? So as things are going along, we're taking those snapshots, we're scanning them, we're validating that they're clean copies of the data. We do the same thing when we run our backups, right? and we're moving those backups off to tape or cloud, but we're scanning them as well. And now in the event that we actually have to do a recovery, we take that snapshot of a snapshot and map it up to a clean environment, a system that's not been compromised or an area that we know is not compromised. We validate it again, we rescan it, we know it was a good copy, it was clean at the time, we rescan, validate everything is good, and if it is, then we simply restore it back to our environment and get back to our operation. By doing this, we take that typical time to recovery, which was 23 days is the average. Now, that means that some customers were recovering a little faster than that. Some customers may never recover. So this is saying, again, think of it from that perspective. The minimal viable company, we want to get up in minutes. We want to be able to recover it almost instantaneously, those primary things that we need. After that, we'll move into the secondary workloads, and we need to get those back up and running within a few hours to make sure that everything else is in our environment that's working okay. And then maybe we'll have some longer term stuff that was out on tape that we may have to go out to tape to restore or recover back those systems. But again, we want to move that whole cycle of recovery from 23 days down to hours at most. And that's the direction that we're trying to help people go to. Now, with that being said, I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that you can do. So one of the questions people often ask is, well, Tony, I think I have a pretty good grasp of where I'm at. I think I've done, we've got some security software, we've done some things with our backup, we've done some other things. So the NIST framework, if you guys are familiar with that, it's these 5 inner pillars here. It's identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. It's all about how you'll respond in the incident, much like a disaster recovery plan almost. And the cyber resiliency assessment is designed to help you kind of identify blind spots, maybe give you some recommendations, help you uncover some of the areas where you could improve that technology and kind of give you a scorecard. So you may be great in the identity side, but maybe your protect is a little lower score. Maybe your respond is perfect, but the recovery process is a little lower. So it helps you kind of narrow down and focus in on where you're at. And Jeff, I think you've got some news for the people that are attending our webinar here about offering up that resiliency assessment.
Well, that's the and obviously, guys, folks that have been on this call, thanks for attending everything here. When we're working with IBM, we thought it very important. We have to have a call to action to help you folks out there get to the next level and see if this is the proper solution set for you. So IBM has afforded us the opportunity at a no cost, combined with their team, to actually do a full, what they call the CRAT, the Custom Repository Analysis tool and process, come out there and actually provide you with a report that shows you where these are, and then also offer recommendations about next steps.
Well, and Jeff, with that, I think if there's any questions out there, I don't know if we have any, Jillian, if there's any questions out there that anybody had.
No, it looks like we don't have any questions, but I believe we have a couple of common questions that have been asked in the past that we can kind of go over here and address, right?
Absolutely. So if you want to read those off, I'll be happy to. I'm sure between me and Jeff, we'll be happy to kind of address those.
But before we get off, though, in case you guys are jumping off to your next meetings and so forth, you see the invite right there, the Calendly invite, and for scheduling that assessment process. Is that right, Julian?
That's correct. You guys can head over there, find a time, and then we'll get the IBM specialists and as well as some of our guys at Storcom, and that way we can get that process started for you guys.
Good. Thank you. I think unless there's any other questions, that wraps it up. We good?
Awesome.
All right, sounds
All right,
good.
folks.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
coming
you.
out. Thanks, Jeff.
right.
Thanks, Tony. You guys have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
guys.
Have a great day.